The wooden bench was cold through my trousers that Sunday morning, even though it was already late spring. I remember the smell of damp wool from the coats hanging near the door, the faint sweetness of floor wax, and the sound of one loose board giving a small creak every time someone shifted their weight. My daughter sat 3 places down from me. She was 20 years old then, old enough to make her own decisions, but still young enough that I could see the little girl in her when she was frightened. She had not looked at me once since we arrived. Her hands were folded too tightly in her lap. The night before, standing beside our buggy in the dark, she had said the one sentence I had been trying not to hear for months. "Dad, I need you to take me away from here." I did take her away, but the part I still think about is why, before the next day was over, I brought her back to the church. My name is Jonas. I am a husband, a father, and the head of a household in an old order Amish community. I tell these stories because people outside our way of life often see only the plain clothes, the horses, and the lack of electricity. They do not always see the decisions underneath it all, especially the ones a father has to make when love and duty seem to pull in different directions. If you have ever had someone you love ask you for help when you were not sure what helping actually meant, stay with me. And if these kinds of honest stories are why you come here, you can subscribe and tell me in the comments what you think a father should do when his child asks to leave something that shaped the whole family. That Saturday had begun like most Saturdays in our house. I was up before 5. The sky was still dark enough that the barn roof was only a black shape against it, and there was a thin mist lying over the lower pasture. I carried 2 galvanized pails across the yard, fed the horses, checked a loose hinge on the west stall, and came back toward the house with mud stuck heavy to the heels of my boots. Nothing about the morning told me it would become one I would remember for years. My daughter had been quiet for some time, not the ordinary quiet of someone who is tired or thinking. There is a kind of silence that begins to take up space in a house. A father notices it, even when nobody names it. At supper, she would eat what was on her plate, answer when spoken to, then clear the dishes and disappear upstairs sooner than she used to. When her brothers laughed at something, she smiled half a second late. When we had visitors, she found work in another room. I had noticed all of it. I had also done what fathers sometimes do when they are afraid of the answer. I told myself she would come through it. In our community, 20 is not childhood. A young woman that age can carry a great deal of responsibility. She can work, contribute to the household, make choices about baptism and marriage, and begin deciding what kind of life she intends to build. But being old enough to choose does not make choosing easy. Sometimes it makes it harder because now the consequences belong to you. That afternoon, I was in the workshop behind the barn repairing a wooden wheel. The iron tire had been removed, and I was working along one spoke with a draw knife. Curled strips of pale wood lay on the floor around my boots. The air smelled of shavings and linseed oil. I heard the door open, but I did not turn immediately. I knew her step. She stood there for perhaps a minute before I put the tool down. Her face looked tired, not sleepy, worn down. I asked if she wanted to sit. She shook her head. I waited. There are moments when a father can ruin a conversation by speaking too soon. I have learned that the hard way. We like to think leadership means having the first answer. Sometimes it means keeping your mouth shut long enough for the truth to arrive. She told me she had been thinking about leaving the community, not for a day, not just to visit someone, leaving. She had not joined the church yet, which mattered. She was not bound by a baptismal promise she had already made. She had attended instruction with others her age, and then stepped back. There had been questions she could not settle in herself. Some were about faith. Some were about what kind of future she wanted. Some were about whether she believed a life chosen because everyone expected it was truly a chosen life. I did not like hearing any of that. I need to say that plainly. I was not standing in that workshop as a neutral man. This was my daughter. I had carried her asleep from the buggy when she was small. I had watched her learn to knead bread beside her mother. I had taught her to drive a quiet mare on the back lane. I had seen her sit through worship, funerals, weddings, meals after barn raisings, and all the ordinary pieces that make a community feel less like an organization and more like the shape of your life. When she told me she wanted to go, I felt something tighten in my chest. My first thought was not noble. My first thought was that I had failed. A man can build a sound barn, raise good crops, keep his debts paid, provide food through winter, and still wonder whether the most important thing he was supposed to pass on has slipped through his hands. I asked her where she wanted to go. She had an older friend living outside the community, about 40 miles away. She believed she could stay there for a few days, maybe longer. She had a little money of her own. She wanted time where nobody was watching her face in church, wondering what she would decide. I asked whether she was running from something specific. She said no. I asked whether anyone had harmed her or threatened her. She said no. That mattered to me more than anything else in that moment. If there had been danger, the rest of this story would be different. A father does not protect an institution at the expense of his child. But that was not what she was telling me. She was telling me she could no longer hear her own thoughts inside the expectations surrounding her. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. When I was young, I had my own season of restlessness. I did not leave, but I came close enough to know that certainty cannot be handed from father to son like a hammer. Faith that belongs only to your parents is not yet your faith. Still, I wanted to talk her out of it. I could feel the arguments lining up in my head. I could have reminded her what she would lose. I could have named every person who loved her. I could have told her that the outside world was not as simple or free as it looked from a distance. I could have spoken about responsibility, family, reputation, and the pain her mother would carry. All of those things were true. That did not mean they were the first things she needed to hear. So I asked her what she wanted from me that night. That was when we walked out of the workshop. The sun had gone down. The yard was blue with the last light, and a breeze was moving through the maple leaves near the house. Our buggy stood beside the shed, with the shafts lifted. One horse stamped in the stall behind us. She looked at the buggy, then at me. That was when she asked me to take her away. I went inside and told my wife that our daughter and I needed to make a drive. I did not give details in front of the younger children. I packed a small lantern, a wool blanket, a jug of water, and some bread and cheese. My daughter had already put a change of clothes into a plain canvas bag. That bag was the thing that made it real. It was not large. It could not have weighed more than 10 pounds. But when I lifted it into the buggy, it felt heavier than a feed sack. We left a little after 8. The road was mostly empty. Hoofbeats have a different sound at night. During the day, they disappear into work in voices and wagons. At night, each strike against the road comes back to you. The lantern threw a weak, yellow circle near the front wheel. Beyond that, there were dark fields, scattered farm lights, and stretches of road where we could see almost nothing. For the first 6 miles, neither of us spoke. I kept both hands on the lines. I remember thinking that I had never been more aware of the distance between two people sitting only 2 feet apart. Eventually, I asked whether she wanted me to take her all the way to her friend's place. She said she did not know. That answer changed something for me. If she had said yes without hesitation, I believe I would have taken her there. I might not have liked it. I might have spent the entire drive wondering where I had gone wrong. But she was an adult, and I had no right to pretend a locked door creates faith. Instead, she told me she wanted to get far enough away that she could breathe, so we kept driving. About 12 miles from home, there is a narrow road that passes an old timber lot. We pulled off near a field entrance where the ground was level. I tied the horse, set the brake, and we climbed down. The air had turned colder. I gave her the blanket and sat on the grass several feet away from her, not beside her. I thought she might need the space. For nearly an hour, she told me what she had been carrying. She was afraid that if she stayed, everyone would assume she had chosen the life when maybe she had only failed to leave it. She was afraid that if she left, her family would look at her as though the best part of her had disappeared. She was afraid of disappointing her mother. She was afraid of disappointing me. That last part hurt more than I expected. A father wants his children to respect him, but there is a danger in becoming so important in your child's mind that they cannot tell you the truth without fearing they will lose your love. I asked myself, sitting in that dark field, whether I had ever given her reason to believe that. I could not find one big moment. Sometimes there is no big moment. Sometimes children learn what we value from 100 small reactions, a tightened jaw, a disappointed silence, the way we speak about someone who made a different choice, the people we praise, the people we mention only with sadness. That is harder to correct because you cannot point to one sentence and take it back. I told her that I could not choose belief for her. I told her that I hoped she would stay. I told her that I believed our way of life had given our family something worth protecting. But I also told her I did not want obedience from her that was made only from fear of me. We sat there until the horse began shifting impatiently. Then I asked one question. If nobody at home knew where she had gone, if nobody was waiting for an answer, and if she did not have to make a permanent decision that night, what did she actually want to do next? She stared out across the field for a long time. She did not want to go to her friend's house yet. She did not want to go home yet either, so we drove. We went another 7 or 8 miles with no destination. At one point, we passed a gas station glowing white beside the road, bright enough to make our little lantern seem useless. 2 cars were parked outside. A man stepped out carrying a paper cup, glanced at us, then went inside. My daughter watched the automatic door open and close. That small scene stayed with me because it represented something to her that night. A world moving at another speed. Light at the touch of a switch. Cars leaving whenever someone pleased. Nobody asking where they had been. There is freedom in that. There are costs too. But I did not list them for her. She already knew what I believed. The question was what she believed. Near midnight, we turned toward home. Not because I ordered it, because she asked to. When we reached our lane, she did not want to go inside immediately, so we sat in the buggy under the maple tree. The house was dark. I could see one faint lamp in the upstairs window where my wife had left it burning. My daughter said she still did not know what she would decide about baptism or whether she would remain in the community for the rest of her life. I told her she did not have to decide the rest of her life before breakfast. That may sound obvious. It did not feel obvious to her. She had been carrying the decision as though there were only 2 doors and both locked behind her the moment she touched them. We went inside. I slept perhaps 3 hours. The next morning was Sunday. I expected her to stay home. I would not have blamed her. After the night we had just had, the last place I thought she would want to sit was in a room full of people whose expectations felt heavy to her. But when I came downstairs, she was dressed for worship. Her canvas bag was still near the door. That image has never left me. A bag packed to leave, and beside it, a daughter dressed to return. I did not ask what it meant. We harnessed the horse. The drive to church was quiet, but it was not the same silence as the night before. Her shoulders were lower. She looked out at the fields instead of down at her hands. When we arrived, several buggies were already lined along the edge of the property. Men were unhitching. Children were being gathered. Women carried baskets inside. It was an ordinary Sunday morning, which somehow made everything harder. Nobody there knew that less than 12 hours earlier, my daughter had asked me to take her away. I knew, she knew, that was enough. As we walked toward the house, I wanted badly to tell her what to do. I wanted to tell her to sit with us, stay close, listen carefully, remember what mattered. Instead, I carried my hat in my hand and let her walk at her own pace. That is what I mean when I say I brought her back to the church. I drove the buggy, I held the lines. I turned us toward home in the night. I brought her to the place where worship was being held, but I did not bring her faith back for her. No father can do that. She sat 3 places down from me that morning because that was where she chose to sit. Her hands were tight in her lap because the questions had not disappeared. Mine had not either. The service went on as it always did. Familiar hymns, familiar scripture, the scrape of shoes against the floor, a child becoming restless, the smell of coffee beginning in another room before the final part was finished. Nothing dramatic happened. That may disappoint someone expecting a story where one sermon changed everything. Life usually does not work that way. My daughter did not stand up and announce a decision. She did not suddenly become certain. She came home with us afterward, ate the noon meal, and helped clean the kitchen. For the next few weeks, we talked more than we had in the previous year. Not every day, not always deeply, but the door was open now. She began asking questions she had been afraid to ask. Some I could answer. Some I could only tell her how I understood them. A few made me uncomfortable enough that I had to think before I spoke. That was good for me. A father can become so accustomed to being the one who teaches that he forgets how much he still needs to examine. There was another change, too. I stopped treating every sign of uncertainty as a problem to be corrected. That was difficult. When you believe something is good, you want your children to choose it. There's nothing wrong with that. I want my children to know the faith that has carried me through hard winters, thin harvests, sickness, grief, and the ordinary weariness of providing for a family. I want them to know what it is to belong to people who show up when a barn burns, when a baby is born, when someone is buried, when a field has to be brought in before rain. I am not ashamed of wanting that for them, but wanting is not the same as controlling. That distinction took me longer to learn than I wish it had. My daughter remained with us. Months later, she made decisions about her faith in her own time. I will leave those details with her because they belong to her story, not mine. What matters here is that the night she asked me to take her away did not end with me winning an argument. It ended with me understanding what my job was. My job was to keep her safe. My job was to listen. My job was to tell her the truth about what I believed without turning my love into a condition she had to satisfy. And when she was ready to go back, my job was to drive. I have thought many times about what might have happened if I had refused to leave the yard that night. Maybe she would have stayed physically. Maybe she would have sat in church the next morning exactly where she always sat. From the outside, nothing would have looked broken, but I think something between us would have closed. And once a child learns that the truth costs them their place beside you, they become very skilled at giving you the version of themselves you want to see. I do not want that kind of peace in my house. It is too expensive. There are fathers who believe firmness means never allowing your children to see uncertainty in you. I understand where that comes from. A household needs steadiness. Children need boundaries when they are young. A family cannot be led by whatever feeling is strongest that morning. But steadiness is not the same as hardness. I can know what I believe and still listen to a daughter who is not sure. I can hope she stays and still take her seriously when she says she may leave. I can bring her back to church without pretending I brought her back to God. That last part belongs somewhere beyond my hands. Years have passed since that night, and what I remember most is not the fear I felt when she packed the canvas bag. It is the weight of the reins in my hands while we drove through darkness with no clear destination. I was used to holding reins. A horse responds when you pull left or right. You can slow it. You can stop it. You can turn it around. Children do not work that way. Not once they become adults, and they should not. You raise them, teach them, correct them, feed them, protect them, and show them by your own life what you believe is worth building. Then one day you discover that all the years of leading were supposed to prepare them to choose when you can no longer choose for them. That is a humbling day for a father. It was for me. If there is one thing I understand now, it is this. Bringing someone back is not the same as dragging them back. Love can hold a door open. It can sit beside someone in the dark. It can tell the truth without making threats. But there are steps another person has to take with their own feet. That Sunday morning, my daughter walked those steps herself. I only drove the buggy. If you value stories like this, about the parts of Amish family life that are harder to explain from the outside, you can subscribe. I will keep sharing them as plainly as I know how, and I would like to hear from you. If your grown child asked you to take them away from the life you had raised them in, would you try to stop them, or would you make the drive?